Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. For those of you that are returning back from the worship service this morning, or if you're just logging on for the first time, then just want to welcome you to our 2021 annual general meeting. And during this time, obviously, if you've logged on and listening, you're successful on that front. Just a friendly reminder for those who, at some point during the presentation, just want to ask questions. We did send out the information, some instructions, some basic instructions in how to sign into Sli.do. So I have my friends, Garrett and Joel, who are going to be helping me just navigating the questions that may come up. I'll try to do some natural breaks as well during the presentation to be able to address any questions that come up. This is being recorded, so if you actually have questions, if you hear it at a later time, then by all means, there's a number of mechanisms. This is not meant to be, here's your one shot to ask questions or give input or feedback. We want to continue to keep that open. And it might be other people who are answering those questions as well, so want to give an opportunity for other voices to speak into this as well. So this is both a look back, a retro perspective look back at the year 2020. Now, some of us don't want to take a look back; they want to look forward. But I just want to highlight some of the things that perhaps maybe some of us were not aware of. And, as a church, we always want to do a better job in communicating in terms of what God is doing in our community. And so you might see a particular piece of what God is doing in your life or in your life group if you're a part of a life group. But we want to expand that actually a bit. So this is meant to be not about business primarily. It's not at the focus. It's not about nickels and noses, how many people are connecting on a Sunday and how much is coming in. We'll touch on those things. But it's really meant to be a vision to say this is what God has been doing and what we're going to trust him for as we move forward as well. And as this is an annual general meeting, but it's also very, very appropriate as we discuss these things, I'm going to open us up in a word of prayer. So I'm going to invite you to join with me as we pray to our God this afternoon. Father, as we seek to pursue you and seek to speak the truth, part of speaking the truth is acknowledging your work in our lives. We don't always see. Sometimes it's cloudy. Sometimes the circumstances and the conditions of our lives cloud what you are doing. And so we need your clarity, and we need a fresh insight and vision, ultimately, of what you are doing, not only in our lives, but in our community as well. And Lord, it's my heart's prayer, along with those who are called to shepherd your church, that people would be encouraged. Yes, life is war at times, and it's tough. And there's many things that weigh us down. But Lord, I pray in the midst of it all that we would have your eyes to see. And so help me just to articulate as clearly as possible the things that you have been doing in the ministry of so many people here at New City Church and even beyond, and help your people to take this ultimately not as a statement of, oh, look how great we are, but how great our God is, that he would work even through the likes of us, not only in building and encouraging and sustaining and persevering us, but ultimately that working in and through us in a world that is often in darkness, in a world that is often constrained simply by our own hearts. And so, Father, I pray that this would be something that would open up our own minds and hearts to the art of the possible, to what you are doing in a profound way. For we pray this all in your Son's name. Amen. Amen. So it's probably not a huge insight to say that this past year, the year 2020, has been a year of adversity. And, arguably, certainly in the history of our church for the past 10 years, but probably even the global church and even our culture, it's been a very, very difficult year. Now, it's impacted people differently, granted, but I think that's probably more of a difference in degree than kind. I think everybody's been impacted. And to acknowledge that, I think it's important that we don't live in denial, and we don't live in a sense of denying the things that have happened to us and living in the conditions that we've been living in. It's been weighty. It's been heavy. People are hurting. There's people that are angry and confused. And that's not just the church. That's throughout. And so knowing actually, especially in a situation like that, how God is working becomes absolutely critical for us to help each other to be able to see his hand, even in the midst of, not only actually despite of, but sometimes because of the adversity that we're going through. So what I want to do is to start off is just take a little bit of a year in review. I'm not going to review the whole year because I think a lot of us know it. But there's a couple of key things that happened last year. Of course, the pandemic is probably the one that's obviously familiar to all of us. It's kind of hard to ignore it. But there's been other changes, as most of us know. I mean, we've experienced what felt like a very quick resignation departure of our lead pastor in the last quarter of 2020. We went through a scenario where we not only actually had to give up meeting at the Confederation Park because it was a high-risk location, having seniors in there, but also recognizing that we probably wouldn't be able to get back in there for some time. There would be one of the last ones to open. And so we made a decision late last year to give it up because we were paying month to month even though we weren't using it, and we thought this could go indefinite. And we just needed to trust the Lord that we would find a new place to meet when the time came. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. And so all those things actually took place. And so one of the first things that we did as a leadership team and as a session is what I would call ministry triage. And ministry triage is when you're going through, whether it be through a crisis or a hardship or something unexpected, something difficult, is you begin to understand what are the priorities? How do we actually need to address just our current circumstances? And the first thing we really wanted to do is just communicate with you when all these things were happening. And hopefully you felt through the congregational meetings we had, we were still meeting in person when that transition took place with Carl leaving, through the life groups, through one-on-one, and ultimately simply to state one thing, to give you the assurance, not that the fact that we have it all together, but the fact that God has built a foundation here at New City Church, which goes beyond any one person. And we've had very, very gifted and capable and skilled pastors over the years. And this is, in one sense, our third transition. If you go back to Northridge, which is the predecessor to New City Church, the third transition that we've actually gone through. In fact, the fourth, if you want to go back a little bit more and talk about Mark Bottomley's father, who was the founder of Northridge as well. But all that to say that even as a leadership team, a number of us have been through church transitions before. We've seen it's not only possible simply just to survive and persevere, but even to grow and to flourish. And so that's one of the first things we wanted really to address. The second one was identifying the gaps. And there was quite a few gaps when Carl left, and one of the reasons was that I think he had his hand in a lot of different things. Every pastor has a different style in terms of the things that they were involved in. And he was involved in a number of different things, from communication to the stuff on the web, Sunday morning, some of the back-end stuff that's required, the leadership team. And almost every area had a gap as a result of that departure. And so the entire Sunday morning even was kind of pieced together by him during COVID. And so when we exclusively went online, we realized that was going to have to be a change, and we were going to have to address that as well. And so all these significant gaps needed, obviously, somebody to fill them if we were going to continue in the manner that we had been doing up to that point. And so let me just say at the outset how thankful I am in the session for all those who have actually stepped up over the past number of months, who basically said, count me in, what do you want me to do? How can I help? And I got to tell you, it's, in years and years and years of pastoring and church planting, just to see so many people and recognizing that they had a role to play. And on the one hand, that's just a healthy community. It shouldn't be precipitated by a crisis or any of those, or even a transition that takes place. But yet many of you have and continue to say, what can I do? How can I help out? How can I serve? And I want to encourage you and support you in that as well. And then in mid-November, there was about 18 of us, ministry staff and leaders, that came together for about a half day. And we provided reports on what was happening in our own ministries. We talked about the areas that now were actually left as gaps and how best to address them, try to put a plan in place to make sure that we had everything covered moving forward. And really, since that time, everything we've done has really been a follow-up or an action to that meeting that we had a number of months ago as well. I've already mentioned the fact that we gave up Confederation Park, and so we felt it was prudent to re-engage the facility search team. We've had a facility search team for about a year and a half, And one of the reasons was because we were coming to the point where we were maxing out our space at the Confederation Park. And so we thought it was important to get ahead of that and try to find other locations that could accommodate our growth with the potential of ideally having a space that could accommodate about 250 to 300, which would give us opportunities either to go to multiple services or actually do a church plant at that point without necessarily undermining the kind of the main church that was doing the sending. And so I'll give you a little bit of report here shortly in terms of the facility search team. You heard a little bit about it in terms of where we are currently today, but I'll expand on that as well. And then, of course, the fourth one was the online services. I mean, we did online services, but we didn't do live streaming until late last year as well. And we just felt that we made some investments in terms of equipment. We want to make sure that we raised up people that can do the sound and the video and the setup and train and cross-train. And that's what we've done, where we have teams that do sound and video. And every week when you log on into YouTube or click the link, it's because there's a number of people working together, hopefully to serve you and minister and encourage you. And I trust that that's been helpful and encouraging for you as well. And so we were able to do a whole Advent service and a Christmas Eve and a Christmas service because of the live streaming as well. And then the fifth one was really moving towards a new communication platform. I mean, it was very disparate. We had YouTube, we had Facebook, we had Twitter, we had Instagram, email, newsletters. And so one of the things we decided is there's so many different things, and some of them were costing us because there was a subscription to be paid. So we wanted to consolidate under one platform. We chose Faith Life because we already had some investments. All the software that we use to do presentations on live stream is through a thing called Proclaim, which is part of the umbrella of Faith Life. Wes and I and a few others have subscriptions to Logos, which is one of the top resources for pastors and teachers and theologians as well. And that integrates with Faith Life as well. It has directories that we can actually tap into. Although it's not set up for Canadians right now, there might be some opportunities down the road to do our tithing through Faith Life. And so it's enabled us actually to cancel a number of subscriptions where there just wasn't getting a lot of use of. But we also recognize when you go to a new way of communicating that it takes some time for people to adopt it. And we got most people signed up as of this point. It's still going to be our primarily internal way to communicate as well. But that's obviously been another change and a transition that we've been trying to accommodate. So really, the end of last year, if there was a theme, it was the year of change. And again, I want to thank you just for your patience and for your encouragement, for your stick-to-itiveness. But ultimately, I thank the Lord for his faithfulness to his church in building such a strong foundation that we can build upon as well. One of the things that I don't know if you've experienced this, but I certainly have experienced this as well. Wherever there's adversity, where there's conflict, where there's hardship, and certainly everything we're going through probably qualifies as all three of those things, whether it be a relationship with someone like your spouse or friends or a pandemic, the first thing that typically gets lost in most of those things is, what's God doing? Where is God? And one of the questions I ask when people are in conflict is that simply that question. Where's Christ? What is he doing? What's he showing you, about him, about what he wants from you? Because the conditions and the circumstances sometimes become so overbearing and so stark that we forget that. And we look at life simply horizontally rather than vertically. We don't see what he's doing at any given time. And so what I want to do really for this next little bit is give you some ministry updates. I want to peel back the curtain if I can and show you and explain to you in terms of what God is doing at New City Church. And so let me just start with a number of different things. Let me say at the outset, I want to apologize because normally if we were all meeting together, I would have each ministry person come and do their own presentation rather than me doing it for her. The last thing I want to do is just be a talking head here for the next little while. We have so many people that not only do ministry, but I want to highlight the fact that there are many people that God has raised up at New City Church who are faithfully working. Some you're aware of, some of them that you might not be. And I'm eager when we start meeting together to give them an opportunity to speak for themselves as well. We could have actually done videotaping and those kinds of things, but we just felt it was probably going to be more onerous trying to basically tape that and piece that all together. So I do apologize in advance, but the updates I'm going to give you are from those who are responsible and oversee those ministries. So basically I'm going to try to capture it in their words as much as I can. So here's some of the highlights. Starting off with, with life groups. So we have right now 6 life groups. Approximately 85 to 90% of those who called New City Church their home, not just members, but those who are regular adherents who are part of life groups. That's 30% more than the previous year. And I got to tell you that in 25 years of ministry, I've never seen that kind of interest in being part of a life group. In most churches, over 50% is very, very, very high. And so to have so many people who are interested in becoming a part of each other's lives and growing that specific area, and a lot of that is being fed by those who are newcomers, those who are just checking out New City Church, that aren't just simply interested in participating on a Sunday morning, but want to be part of a community to work out, to grow, to be encouraged by their faith as well. And one of the things we do to support that is Tyler provides some leadership and coordination with our small group leaders. They are our shepherds and leaders, and hopefully providing some facilitation of that. Now, there's other people in those groups that provide gifts as well, so that's the whole intent. But we want to make sure that they're equipped, that they're trained, and they're also supported in what they do. So every 2 months, all the life group leaders actually get together. And we get together for training. We get together to share what's working in our groups, what might not be actually working that well. There's any issues that we can help each other on. It's always done with confidentiality. Nothing shared there that would compromise anything that's shared in the life group. So I want to assure you of that as well. And then we pray for one another. And both rejoicing in what God is doing in terms of all the positive and encouraging things, and just hard things that people are going through, then we want to pray for that as well. So it's just an opportunity to sharpen one another, learn from one another, learn from what's going on, and then training our life group leaders up to really be in a good position to help the group to care for one another as well. Women's ministry update. So this is Kim Hoeksma, who's really done a fantastic job in initiating and really starting, not because we've asked her, not because, hey, you know what, we're going to have a women's ministry and we need somebody to man that, but she, out of her own initiative, who came to me saying, these are the things that I want to do. And so there's 2 areas of women's ministry that I want to highlight for you. One's a women's Bible study that has been meeting once a week since January 2020, so a little over a year ago. There's approximately 6 participants. The attendance has been both consistent and the commitment very, very strong on that as well. And so they've gone through a number of different studies. I won't name you all the studies that they're going through, and there's another one coming up more focusing on the spiritual disciplines as well. In the same vein, Kim is providing leadership for a women's and hosting and facilitating a women's prayer meeting that also has been meeting since January 2020, meets actually once a week. Approximately 4 to 7 women come as a part of that as well. It's an opportunity to share the burdens, pray for one another, and also actually give praise for the answered prayers that are there. And it is during the day. Now, not all the women can make it during the day, and sometimes evenings and weekends would be preferable. So Kim actually asked if there is a woman out there who wants to help facilitate that, either on an evening or in a weekend prayer meeting for women, then please actually connect with her, and I'm sure that we would love to accommodate that. And maybe perhaps some of the women who are listening right now weren't even aware that we were doing anything like that. So I just wanted to let you know that is an opportunity that's there. We also have a men's group. Now, again, some of you perhaps weren't actually aware of that. It's been meeting for some time. Kevin Schwattai is providing some leadership in that capacity. And he has a group of about between 4 and 14 people that are men that are meeting on I believe it's a weekly or bi-weekly basis. But they're going through the Gospel of Mark. And it's not just New City people. It's a bigger swath than that. It actually includes a number of people in the neighborhood, in the area of Cochrane, and others as well. And so certainly there's, again, another that's more focused on some of the things that come through on men's and men's issues. And so Kevin's done a great job on that front as well. In terms of the senior youth, that's been Mark and Melissa. They've been are very faithful leaders for the past couple of years. They have 10 youth that are meeting on a regular basis. 4 of those are then kind of designated or recognized as leaders as well. Many excited and earnest new members have become part of that group as well. And, interestingly enough, many churches, if you talk to many churches and youth ministers, they have put their youth ministry on hold. because either people don't want to be on Zoom anymore or just losing its momentum. That just hasn't been the case with New City Church and the youth that are involved in New City Church. Highly committed to coming out on a weekly basis. They meet from 2 to 4 on every Sunday. And they've been going through a number of different series. They finished one on Colossians. They went through some theology of Romans. They've looked at, what's another one? Apologetics with Joe Jaruba with Faith Beyond Belief, one of the organizations that we partner with and support. And most recently, they're going through the book of Daniel together and have plans in the future to go through Philippians as well. So again, open in prayer, take turns in terms of going through a prepared Bible study. And so they just wanted to express their thanks to so many of your kids who are growing in their faith, who are taking steps of faith, who are learning from one another, who are challenging actually one another, how encouraged that they have been just with the participation of your children as well. And one of the things that we want to do with all our ministries to a certain degree is also prepare new leaders coming up. So Mark and Melissa have been very faithful for the past couple of years, but they actually transitioned from another faithful couple, Kevin and Mackenzie, who were doing it for a number of years as well. And it was just, I think in one sense, it was just a beautiful picture of a leadership transition taking place where Mark and Melissa joined Kevin and Mackenzie for a period of time. There was overlap, and then they handed the reins over. And we'd love to see the same thing actually happen there, not because they're eager to leave it, but we also want to give people an opportunity. There's seasons of life and look at other ministry opportunities as well. So if that's of interest to you to be involved in youth ministry, then please connect with them. I'm sure they would be so encouraged and tell you a little bit more in terms of the opportunities that are there. For the junior youth and the children's church, there's Mark and Lana have done a great job. With the junior youth, those are tweens and teens from grades 6 to 9. They meet once to 2 times per month. On average, there's about 10 youth that are attending regularly. They're going through the 10 Commandments and the relevance and the application of the 10 Commandments to our lives today. Lana's also looking at doing a VBS, Vacation Bible School program. I don't believe we've done one in the past, but certainly want to take a look at doing that. Probably not this year. That's a 2022 venture. But that would be an outreach both to the kids and family, not only part of New City Church, but beyond in our communities and neighborhoods as well. In terms of children's ministry, this has been temporarily put on hold with COVID. Doesn't mean we're not doing anything or haven't done anything. Lana purchased an online curriculum that we've posted to Faith Life. So once a week, there's a new Bible video story. There's a devotion that comes along with that and an activity as well, along with a leader guide. So parents can actually use that in terms of encouraging your own children and in the fundamentals of the faith. You can access at any time. Simply just helping to instruct and guide and support your children at home with the gospel. Lana has actually asked if you're interested in being part of this group in terms of what's happening on Faith Life and how best to empower and equip parents in terms of teaching their children. And please actually connect with her. I'm sure she would love to find out if you're interested in that. You can contact her at lana@newcitychurch.ca. One of the things we did last year that we haven't formally carried over was a discipleship ministry that Wes and I kicked off, and I was there for about 1 or 2 of them and then handed it over to Wes, who admirably actually took it to its completion. So we did that for the whole year. And we had probably an average of about 10 people a month that participated in that. We did a number of readings around theology. Who is God? What is the gospel? What does it mean to be a disciple? What are the marks of a healthy Christian in the church? Self-awareness, how to be a good steward of the gifts that we actually have, like our money and our time as well. And so I know a number of you really enjoyed that part of it. We'll continue to incorporate pieces of discipleship, specific discipleship, in this year as well. Our prayer is always, hopefully, and certainly from a leadership perspective, we want to make sure that's the foundation of everything that we do. A lot of the life groups, some life groups put a lot of emphasis, in fact, actually the majority of the time in the life groups in prayer. Now, of course, we want all our life groups making sure that they don't neglect prayer as well. But it's not the only place where we're doing it. We're coming together for constants of prayer. There's about a dozen that were together for New Year's, praying into the new year. That was a great encouragement. We've done concerts of prayer last year as well. And as most of you know, but perhaps not all of you know, that every Sunday at 10 o'clock, there's anywhere between 6 and 16 of us that gather together at 10 o'clock to be able to pray, not only for the service, but pray for the church, pray for our city, pray that as the word gets out, that it would find the fertile soil of people's hearts as well. And so you're always invited to come out to that as well. And last, just before we take a little bit of a break and see if there's any questions, the facility search team. So the facility search team is made up of Hannah Hill, Trudy Chan, and John Shooten. And they contacted, now some of them actually, we're still waiting for a response back, but 40 churches, 15 community centers, arts centers, and then 2 institutions before we landed on the village. So let me just say just a couple things about the village. It's a multi-use facility. It's been used, a number of churches have used it. We looked at it about a year and a half ago, I think, for a late afternoon service. I think it was from 4 to 8 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe 5 to 8 o'clock. There were some concerns, not with the building itself or the facility, but the sound. They've made some changes to that. They are so open. We had the Ash Wednesday service at the village at no cost. They basically said, if you want to, once you take March and work out the tweaks, we won't charge you actually for that as well. So again, it's owned by Rocky Mountain Bible College, but it's administered with a family and there's a number of businesses, there's ministries that are there as well. So there are other people using it, but it is available right now on Sunday afternoon from 12 to 4. We do have first right of refusal. If the church that's meeting in there in the morning decides for whatever reason to vacate, then we would have first right of refusal. It's about the same size as Confederation Park in terms of capacity. Now, of course, when we start off, we'll be at a reduced capacity, but also gives us opportunity, whether it be through membership classes, whether it be through training, to be able to use it for other kinds of events as well, as you think of Easter and Good Friday and those kinds of things. So again, March 14th will be our kind of first official service. There's no long-term lease that we're actually having to sign up for. So if something else comes up in the interim period while we're meeting there, all we need is between 30 and 60 days, and we can actually get out of that lease as well. So a lot of flexibility, very low risk, and hopefully I know it'll be an encouragement for many of you as we gather together on Sunday morning. So let me just take a pause there. And I don't see any questions as of yet. Just give it 30 seconds. Okay, 1 second here. It's not showing up on mine. Oh, perfect. Okay, so somebody wrote, how can I join a life group? How does one get assigned to a group? How are age, geographic location, preference, meeting schedule, etc. considered? Great question, Celia. I won't get into too much of it because I can do a follow-up with you on that. Typically, that goes through Tyler Grant, who is our life group coordinator. What we want to do is make sure that size does matter in terms of life group. If it gets too big, it becomes a little unwieldy and it loses the dynamics of a life group where maybe just a few people dominate. So typically the rule of thumb is between 12 and 14 as a max. We try to align as much as we can in terms of geography so people don't have a long way to travel on any given day. Right now, pretty well all of them are doing it Zoom. But we also look at days of the week. There's some times where a person can only meet a specific day of the week. So if you just simply try to contact us at www.newsurdichurch.ca, there's a place where you can contact us as well. Just say you're interested in a life group, and we'll work together. Tyler, if he needs to work with the life group leaders to be able to say, is there any group that can accommodate another person? Our group has done that with 3 new people, and has worked out very, very well. I know some of the other groups have done the same thing on that front. Will the church keep looking for a facility once starting a village? Yes. Yeah, so we're not disbanding it. We're continuing to look. This is certainly filling in a short-term role. And, as I think as most of you probably would have picked out, with 40 churches being contacted and 15 community and art centers and 2 institutions, they're far and few between, especially Sunday morning. Now, I know some people out there actually are completely okay, even prefer it in the afternoon. Some of those people are in this room right now. And so, we just want to be flexible with that. I think most of you would agree meeting is probably better than not meeting. And so if that's what we do in the short term, but if you have some leads, places that you know of that are fairly central, because we have people that are coming from all 4 quadrants, then please, you can contact the facility search team. That's either Hannah, Trudy, or John, and they would be more than happy to follow up on that lead as well. Is there any other ones? Is that the only ones? Is the online discipleship group still running? No, it's not. We are looking at somewhat revamping that. Some of that we've brought into the life group leader training. But once I go through some of the priorities and the things we're looking at, we want to do things like that. It might not be exactly the same format as I said, but certainly want to do things that really lend to how do we grow as disciples of Jesus Christ. Is that the only one? Is that the last one? Okay. Well, let me keep really focused now on that. Was a kind of a look back. I gave you a ministry update. Now, what about 2021? What's the ministry priorities and focus that we're going to have on this year? So let me just say, as a principle, we don't want to do everything. And we know, both from time and space and number of people, rather focus maybe on fewer things, but do those really well than doing, let's say, 100 things that we're going to be so spread out, and it's just not going to be very, very helpful and beneficial for people. The first thing, our first focus really is, it's not necessarily in priority and order, but just one of the pillars, is focus on teaching and discipling and instructing. As we are a people of truth, as we heard this morning, we need to know what that truth is. And so everything we do, whether it be discipleship, studying, we want to be a learning community, a growing community. We want to be a community that feeds itself on the scriptures, that profits from church history in terms of what God has been doing for the past 2,000 years in his church as well. This means Sunday morning, of course, is always going to be a staple in terms of preaching, Christ-centered, Christ content, Christ proclaiming. The New City Catechism, and I know some of the groups are going through their catechism, is looking at the fundamentals, the foundations of faith and how they apply very practically and specifically to our own lives. I know there's one group specifically that's taking the New City Catechism and doing exactly just that. And then Bible studies, we have it on men's, we have one on the women's. Those who are in charge of youth are doing a fantastic job in instructing and guiding our youth as well. So that's one of the focuses that we certainly want to take a look at. The other one is, I called it, there might be a better way of putting this, just tackling the hard issue, H-A-R-D, hard issues that people don't want to talk about. And very often, even in the church, that we actually don't want to talk about. There might be some taboo subjects that, it's like, well, we don't really want to talk about that. And, I think it's the reminder that people are dying without hope. And one of the reasons very often in our society, because the church won't give them hope. And it won't give them hope because it won't talk about the things that really tends to affect and shape who we are as human beings. And so we don't want to shy away from that, because the Bible doesn't shy away from that, and God doesn't shy away from that. And even when it comes to our children, if we don't do it, if we don't give the opportunity for them to ask the questions and inquire, there should be no questions that are off the table. And ever since we've started New City Church, we want to be that kind of church that welcomes inquirers, that welcomes people asking questions. That is the impetus to grow. It's the motivation to grow. That's how we learn. Because if we don't do it, our culture is more than happy to step in and do the instructing and the catechizing. And they often are. They're shaping in a way that's incredibly profound with social media and other types of media as well, that's shaping really the next generation. So not only providing people in terms of this is what Christians believe, but this is why we believe what we believe. So providing some of the apologetics and some of the explanation for that as well. The church should do the best job in making sure that our children are prepared specifically for this world. And without fear, without compromise, but with great confidence that God will use that as they become God's ambassadors as well in this world. And so we definitely want to be doing that. The Sermon on the Mount is just one of those examples. We talked about anger, lust, lying, conflict, money, wealth, marriage, divorce. We're going to talk about, there's a number of other things that it's going to touch on, conflict. One of the series that we're looking at, although it's not in stone right now, is in the fall time going through the book of Daniel. And Daniel is a great classic example is what's that relationship between faith and culture, especially when the culture is antagonistic towards the faith. And so it's a great model, and it's a great teaching on that as well. And so that's one of the things we're looking at doing this coming fall. The life group leaders, one of the things that we're going to do this year as well as part of the training is helping them to develop not only the skill, but the capacity to be able to, how to deal with conflict in your own life, in relationships as well. Because one of the things that hopefully it's not a surprise to anybody listening right now, is there's conflict in the church. And hopefully that's not a revelation and incredible insight, because there's people in the church. The difference between the world and the church is not that there's conflict in one and not the other. It's how we deal with it. And the Bible gives us incredible wisdom. It's a great resource in knowing how to deal with our differences without necessarily enforcing uniformity, where everybody believes exactly everything on every point. There are certain things, truths that hold us and bind us together that we want to be uncompromising on, but there's also latitude and needed charity in some of the secondary matters as well. The youth ministry already touched on that, just the importance, and a lot of the youth leaders are doing that. They're having some hard conversations around hard topics. And more often than not, I know that youth are very, very excited to be able to talk about those kinds of things. This morning made announcements about purity and accountability group, whether it be in a group or one-on-one as well. Those are things that need to be addressed. Nothing could be worse than living in denial or presumption that I don't need it or I don't have to have it or shouldn't actually do it. We should be very, very candid and honest to say, yeah, I need some help in this area, and I want to be with other people who recognize the same thing. And then this summer, I know I've been talking about it to a few of you as well, we're looking at doing a marriage course, probably in the summer when we take a hiatus from the life groups, if that's possible. I don't want to inundate every week with tons and tons going on. And the whole point of it is really twofold. It's not just to tackle what would be considered downstream issues. Downstream issues is our marriage is on the rocks. We're in survival mode. And so now you're trying to do reparation, you're trying to do reconciliation. But there's also upstream issues, is how do we develop certain practices? How do we safeguard the marriage so it doesn't end up going down that road? And so Tyler and myself, he's the one who brought up the idea. There's a few others as well. We're looking at putting that together. As I said, it probably won't be till late spring or summertime, but just to let you know that it is on the docket to do that as well. Third is community building and pastoral. We have to be a church ultimately that cares for one another and exhibits personal kindness and charitableness. Even if we disagree, that's fine on certain areas. Life groups is always going to be actually the foundational piece of New City Church. We're a church that has small groups. It is a church of small groups. And so if you're not involved in one, I want to encourage you to be involved in one. And we're growing in that area. Some groups have met longer. Some groups are more mature. Some groups actually do a better job in that. That's okay. Where are we today, and how do we move that along? And hopefully the life group leaders could help in that process as well. Unfortunately, last year, we normally have an annual church retreat. We couldn't do it because of COVID. If everything goes well, hopefully we'll have it this year. It's typically on the September long weekend. And more information as we get a little bit closer to that date to see what will be going on in our province, to see if that's possible as well. And then just Sunday picnics and outings or picnics in the park. Certainly, as things warm up, being outside and outdoors, hopefully will facilitate some of those connections more than anything else. And then just the one-on-one. I know some of you are just always take initiative with either people in your group or friends. You hear something, maybe you see something on Facebook and you know that person's hurting and you reach out to them. The elders play a role in that, but it's just a role. This is life group members. It's everybody pitching in together and saying, you know what? If I see a need and I recognize that maybe God's telling me I'm the one who's supposed to meet that need. And so we just want to make sure that that's exactly what we're doing. We're taking initiative with each other as well. Part of that is membership class. We've been talking about that today, and both membership classes and those who've gone through the classes are simply now waiting to be received as members, and baptisms. So right now there's 22 people that are signed up for membership class, the most we've ever had in our history. We have 13 people who've gone through the membership classes who potentially can become members if they want to. There's a process that we need to go through once a person does a membership class. So let me just say this. That's 35 people looking to become members at New City Church. And in a day and an age and where some people have the perception that people's commitment is waning, that the things and the bonds that hold people together has been loosened. I got to tell you, this is contrary to that. Most of the time what happens is people will come to a church on Sunday, they'll dip their toes, they'll come for a while, maybe they'll actually be part of a life group. If they're part of a life group, maybe they'll be part of or asking to become members. The vast majority of people who've connected with New City Church are bypassing Sunday morning, not that they're not coming, but they're asking about life groups and memberships. That's never happened before. I just have not seen that. And by the way, anecdotally, talking to a few pastor friends of mine, they're seeing it in their churches as well, where more and more people are looking to become part of small groups, or more and more people are looking to become members, not just consumers, just taking actually, a Sunday morning in, but going beyond that. And I think it's not without coincidence, the timing of it all, that what the pandemic has highlighted for many people is it's not enough just to come Sunday morning and sit in a chair and listen to a sermon and then go home afterwards. It's simply not enough, not for deep transformation. That's not what we've been made for. And this would seem to bear it out, that God is working in that capacity. We have 8 people that are looking to become baptized. Now, the majority of those are covenant children, and that's good. That's okay as well, but not exclusively. And then all that is what I've been talking about is equipping, caring for one another, tackling the hard issues. What about our community? What about our city? Again, we've always said that New City Church is a church for the city. So what does that mean, and what does that translate to practically? One of the main signs that God is active in a community is that people actually are connecting with others and sharing their faith and sharing the life of Christ, not just in word, but in deed with their friends and their neighbors as well. And so some of you know we've partnered with Sunshine Ministry Suite the past 2 years, which is a ministry that's really dedicated to helping women caught up in abuse, physical, emotional, psychological abuse. It is a transitional place. So there's apartments that we fitted in terms of furniture and try to beautify, and a number of folks here have been involved in that in terms of painting and buying furniture. We've had 2 turnovers, which basically means a lady and their children have been in that. They've been there for a few months, providing the transitional housing. They would find other places, and then we'd had somebody else kind of move in there as well. So that happened twice this year in January and October. We're looking to do some upgrades to that suite as well. And we're probably expecting another 1 to 2 turnovers in 2021 as well. Because this has become somewhat of a staple, it's now a budget item. We're allocating some of the budget items to actually the Sunshine Suite as well, just basically as a commitment, not only of individuals, but as a church to this little known, it's maybe not as well known as some of the other ministries, but very, very vital and important to our city as well. Life group outreach continues. I know a number of groups have done that already. We certainly want to encourage all our life groups to have a focus as part of that life group on mission, even if it means praying for those outside of the life group and outside of the church. I know some of you are doing it. Want to encourage you to continue to do it. And those who aren't quite there yet, just to, it might be a step of faith for a number of you, but to think of creative ways, maybe as a life group, that you can do outreach as well. We are going to look at whether it be digital or in person to do something like a Christianity Explored. Some of you know about the Alpha course as well. What they are is typically it's a meal as part of an outreach, and 10 to 12 weeks, but it's a great opportunity to invite neighbors or coworkers, those who perhaps are interested or inquiring about Christianity as well. So we'll have more to say about that in the months ahead. And then God at Work. You heard the first one today, just again from the testimony of Donna Burrell. This has really been, for me, it's been from the coaxing and the encouragement of my wife. She would often hear me say something about what God is doing in somebody's life at our church, and it could be hard. It could be something that they're learning about themselves, or God's done an amazing work, either working in their life or through their life. And she would often say to me, rightly so, I hear about that, you hear about that, maybe Wes hears about that, but most of the church doesn't hear what God is doing in our community. And it was for me, it was a very appropriate comment. And so we want to do a better job in highlighting specifically how God is working in your life, so that other people in the church can be encouraged by it. And hopefully that was an encouragement to you this morning as well. And then the church plant. We've always basically said we're going to be a church planting church, and we're committed to that. We've made an investment in bringing Wes on board. And I'll say a little bit more about Wes here shortly. But, as we think about what that church plant looks like and the timing of that church plant, keep in mind that typically most church plants, for them to become self-sufficient, what I mean self-sufficient in terms of it financially and actually having leadership in place and elders in place, typically in Canada is close to between 5 and 7 years. 5 being very, very short, 7 probably being more average, sometimes longer. And so the focus there in church planting in Canada is to make sure that we're doing it. It's really slowly, methodically, prayerfully, is building a strong foundation. Gathering people is one thing. Building something that's sustainable, which is really God's work, just simply takes time in our culture. It's a lot of hard rock out there. And it's long-term investments. I mean, Wes and the session, we've talked about this numerous times, is we really want to build something that's sustainable, that's tenable, and to be able to do that, it's not, hey, we're going to actually have a church, a full-fledged church in 2 years. It's let's begin to do the right kinds of things. Make sure the people that surround Wes and his team are really set up for that thing to be very, very strong out of the gate. And it's not for everybody. As most of you know, or not most of you know, maybe some of you know, doing church plants, it's all hands on deck, and there's very little spectators. Now, that should be true in an established church as well, but certainly in a church plant where you have few people, you really want people who grab the vision, understand what they're there for, and are committed to that as well. So we'll have more to say about that. It doesn't mean that anything stops. It's continue to meet neighbors, continue to network in the community. None of that actually stops. That's going to be the foundational layer. Prayer becomes very, very critical to that as well. We've had one network, the Grace Network, which we actually support as well, that have committed $15,000 a year for that church plant as well. And so a new city will be kicking in on that as well. So we want to make sure it's on a solid footing on that basis. And the last, in terms of more priorities and focus, probably the most important one. And I say that not because, that's what a pastor should say, but really is a conviction in my heart. It's kingdom-centered prayer. Is we don't just pray for ministry and the work of ministry. Prayer is the work of the ministry. The only way that we know for sure that God's in it is that we reflect in our disposition towards him in dependence and humble reliance on him, saying, God, this is your work. So somebody once said, all our plans are written in pencil. Only God gets to write in pen. Only he leaves the indelible mark. And it's simply true. And so we don't want to get ahead of it. It doesn't mean we don't plan. We have to be good stewards, but it's always with the sense of, God, if you want to do something different, if you're looking to do something different, give us the orientation towards you and the openness and the humility to do course corrections where we actually need to do that. So that's just the ministry focus and priorities for 2021. Hopefully you know that, again, it's not 1,000 things, but it's a few things that we really, really want to do well. But there's a lot of things happening, and maybe perhaps you weren't aware of most of those. So let me just take a break there and see what else we have here. Any plans for childcare during the service while at the village? That's a great question. I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you on that one if we're going to do childcare. I know that we didn't do it when we came back in Confederation's Center. Some of it's going to be working with the guidelines that the village themselves have And so I do need to actually confirm that, whether we're going to do that. Somebody asked the question, the past few years, many people join the church and we just do not know each other's names. How can we improve that we know each other's names? Great question. I don't necessarily have the silver bullet. I'm always open to some suggestions there. I know some of you in Faith Life have posted a picture next to your name. That certainly helps in terms of not only knowing the name, but the picture. So when you see that person in church on Sunday, you might make actually that connection at some point. Aside from that, not 100% sure. Certainly we can talk more about that in terms of what that would look like. And then somebody asked the question, can we have groups come through on a Sunday in addition to the church service to do communion exclusively? So in our church tradition, communion is not a set-apart thing that it's on its own. It's part of what's called word and sacrament together. It's part of the preached word, and it's a connection to the preached word. So you don't do just the sacrament without the gospel as part of that, and a part of the message as part of that. That's true of baptism. It's true of the Lord's Supper as well. Any other ones? No? Okay. We're just about near the end here. And so let me just give you an update on staff and personnel. There's been a couple of changes that we have here in 2021. Suzanne Van Hill, who was our administrative assistant for a number of years, well, since the beginning, is part of it is just to acknowledge that things have changed, not only with COVID, but now with a lead pastor. When Carl came on board, the dynamics of how much he was doing and how much he was delegating to Suzanne had changed as well. Looking for a new lead pastor. I think what we want to do is make sure that there's enough latitude for the person coming in to say, hey, you know what, you can actually kind of choose and see who's going to be a fit for you in terms of your working style and personality and all those kinds of things as well. And part of it's just a recognition that a lot of the things that Suzanne was doing just wasn't required anymore. I think it went down fairly substantially. Moving to Faith Life changed a few things as well. And let me just say personally just how thankful I am to Suzanne just for her role that she's played in the past 10 years and faithfully serving our congregation in a number of different capacities as well. And this is not about putting people to pasture. There is more than enough work to do. There's seasons of ministry as well. And so there's going to be more than enough opportunities for any of these people who actually are transitioning from one ministry and potentially looking at another. Josh Lee, who was our director of worship, we brought on as a director of worship as well. Again, since we haven't really been meeting, and Josh is in a full-time job right now, we just recognized that it just wasn't a position that was required, and so we won't have that. That could change in the future, and we'll relook at it when the time comes, but we certainly don't need it at this point. In terms of the elders, because a number of you actually have asked this question, who are the elders and how does Wes and Tyler fit into the scheme of things? Right now there's two elders, myself as what's called a teaching elder as a pastor, and then Don Kitchener. Some of you know that Calvin Van Hill served as an elder for a number of years. He has stepped down from an active role of eldering effective January 1st. And so I wanted to thank him as well. And certainly if you get an opportunity to see him, thank you. Just thank him for his faithfulness over a number of years. I got to tell you that it's rewarding, but it's certainly actually it's a great burden to have as well. And part of that is making sure that whoever is doing it really is called. And so how does Wes and Tyler fit in? They would be called assistants to the session. So they're not ordained and they're not called by the congregation. All elders are called by the congregation. As most of you know, Wes is not called by the congregation as of yet. That Tyler's not called to the congregation as of yet as well. But we recognize that it's It's only prudent and wise to get as much counsel as we have in terms of shepherding the church. And both these gentlemen, Wes, who is looking to become ordained here as a teaching elder, and Tyler as well, who's been faithfully serving in a number of different capacities and now is life group coordinator as well, have really, in our minds, exhibited the character of those who are called to be elders. And so they provide input. We use them as sounding boards. I do want to say that when we gather together as a session, if there's specific pastoral issues that are confidential and just confidential and require actually just greater confidentiality, probably put it that way, then Wes and Tyler, they were not just recuse themselves, but literally we have on a Zoom call. And just Don and I will actually talk about if there's specific things that need to take place. It's important that you understand that we want to hold the trust that the congregation has in who you've called. But we're deeply appreciative in everything that both Tyler and Wes have done and continue to do and serve you, the congregation. They've been an invaluable resource for both Don and me as well. So hopefully that gives some explanation there. This week, by the way, is our presbytery where all the churches or the church leaders gather together. It's going to be on Zoom again. And Wes is being put forward for ordination, assuming that all takes place, and there's not a reason not to think that it might not be. It's never a done deal. It's not out of my control. Both Don and I make our recommendation as well, and they examine Wes. He doesn't have to go through any of the new examinations, but assuming that does happen, he becomes ordained, then Wes will become an assistant to the session. So not called by the congregation, but called by the session. But he will be a teaching elder. So he'll have all the prerogatives and the responsibilities of an elder, and that means being able to do the sacraments, officiating weddings, doing baptisms, all those things as well. And so certainly look forward to that as well. That will be a great help and hopefully a great encouragement for Wes as well. In terms of communication, as you know, one of the biggest things I find is comments like, and I totally get it, is we don't know what's going on, or we don't really hear what's going on, and we need to hear more from other people. And all valid points, and hopefully everything that we're about to do will address some of those things. As I already mentioned to you about Faith Life, we're using that a lot more. We've made a lot of progress in the past few months. I think we have almost everybody actually signed into that because we're using that for our mailers, but also in terms of specific ministries. So if we want to do an outreach, or if we want to do something for the youth or for the children, having those names in there, even of your children, again, we'll put parameters around that in terms of who can use it. It's only through official means, but certainly that's one of the ways we'll try to communicate it to you as well. Weekly email and newsletters, it'll be a big piece of that as well. Sunday morning is, before the service, we actually put on a loop all the announcements, and at the end of the service, we'll also highlight some of the announcements as well. The website is a work in progress. Literally, we have it there right now, and it has some limited functionality behind it in terms of connecting with us. Obviously, that's still going to be a work in progress, and that's going to be the outward-facing, from a digital perspective, platform for New City Church as well, and for people to connect with us. The life groups continue to be a way of communicating certain things that are happening to the church. We'll make sure we're connecting with the life group leaders who can then actually who can connect with you as well. And then I get the challenge. For some people, it's like, I don't want too much information. I get too many emails as it is. And for other people, it's not enough. And so we're looking for suggestions. And if that's not enough and it's not connecting with you, I do want to push back just a little bit, saying these are all the ways we're communicating. And so if you're not taking advantage of them, if you're not going to Faith Life, if you're not reading your emails, if you're not listening to announcements, there's very few things that we can do in addition to that. So they're there for you, specifically to let you know. I know we can always make improvements, and certainly you actually want to do that as well. And so I'll just leave it at that. And then let me just finish off with the budget. And again, we're not going to go through it line by line. If there's any questions? Okay. Will you be adding any ruling elders this year? Maybe. And the only reason I say maybe, it's from a timing perspective. We will be adding ruling elders, and we need to add ruling elders. One of the things that we've always had in New City Church is that we're not going to do that rashly. And so what happens with ruling elders is the congregation recommends individual men in the congregation to become ruling elders. In the past, our training session has been a year long. We do think it's that kind of critical role, that we get the right ones. It doesn't mean that it's not like that you have to be a theologian or the best teacher. What we do is we're going to look at scriptures and say, what do scriptures actually tell us are the main criteria for selecting ruling elders as well. So that is something that I'm cognizant of, the session's cognizant of. We want to make sure we're trying to balance that out with a new pastor potentially coming on board and having him as part of that as well. So that is a plan. I just don't know if it's going to be done in 2021. So just stay tuned for more on that. See if we can do that. And then will the session be putting forward new candidates for the ruling? Oh, that was the same question. So we don't make the recommendation. We do put the recommendation. But that's near the end. So what happens is as a congregation, you put forward names. They go through the training. The session evaluates and assesses to see, is this person qualified based on the scriptural criteria for that role as well. So we're not a church. The PCA is not a church that forces and imposes elders. Even the people that we would recommend at the end of that process, you have an opportunity to vote and to say, yes, we want this person. Actually, we believe they have all the qualifications and they have the pastoral heart to be able to do that. So you as a congregation is involved, but we will be as well. So again, more information on that. Okay, let me just try to wrap up here without necessarily going through every line item. The budget. What did God do last year? Again, it's not about nickels and noses, as I said about that, but it is about God's faithfulness. And last year, in a down economy, in a place, especially in Alberta, which is hurting financially, we had the second best giving year ever in our 10 years. The only year that was more was the year before. And so that itself has been remarkable. Again, I want to tell you that talking to some of my peers and colleagues, not just in our denomination, the same thing. So that itself tells you, in terms of people's level of commitment, that they're willing to continue to invest and give graciously, sometimes even sacrificially, in this kind of economy, just to see God's work continue. So that was really, really encouraging. We also want to allocate more of the funds to outreach and to reaching our city as well. And so you're not going to be able to see everything that's in front of you, but if you can just, do you have the ministry? So you have the ministry partners. Those are the ministry partners, and as you can see, they're more or less the same. There's a few changes that we have made. There's one with C2C. We just don't have the same relationship as we once did, so we're reallocating some of that money to the Sunshine Suites. But most things there are status quo. We're trying to do a better job in trying to communicate from all the people who are in the field. Some of you get some of the prayer letters. We probably need to do a better job, and we've been talking about that internally, how we do that. Communicate where this money is going, what these people and these missionaries and these workers are doing in respective fields. And so certainly see, you can look forward to seeing more information on that front. Just going to the next one, the NCC Operating Ministries. The 2021 is the final budget. You'll see those are the final budget items, the final expenses, and on the right-hand side is the proposed. So you see a discrepancy at the bottom between the two. So what accounts for that discrepancy of almost 17,000? The fact we're going to be 17,000 projected expenses more in our operating expenses for ministries than last year. Really two things. One is the retreat, which we didn't have last year. And so we help subsidize because we recognize it can be onerous for a number of people and perhaps even families. That's $13,500. So that's what we've done every year. And we would have done it last year had we had a church retreat. We didn't. But we're, again, if for whatever reason we can't meet, then that just won't be an expense. And then investing in upgraded sound and music equipment. We may not need that if we're actually in the village and use their facility, but we put that down as a budget item. So that's really the main discrepancy between those two. Just going to the payroll expenses, just a few changes that are there. You'll see lead pastor. On the proposed budget, it's $21,750. That's prorated, assuming that we find a lead pastor the last quarter of 2021. Realistically, just based on past precedent and seeing how fast or how not fast this actually takes place, that probably won't happen. In which case, that just simply won't be an expense this year. But we thought we'd just put it in there just in case that it was. Two more significant just changes. One is both my salary and Wes's salary are pegged at $48,000. There's a number of you that contacted the session. This was not, just so you know, that I recused myself completely on my salary. I know a number of you actually came and they said, Wes and Mike, based on the workload they're doing, and we want to make sure it was aligned with the effort and the principle of a laborer being worthy of their wages. And so I want to thank you just for you, the church, who've always been so supportive of your pastors. And so those are both at $48,000. Wes still also has other supporters that have carried over to continue to support his church plant as well. The other one is you'll see communications coordinator of $12,000. So that's kind of a net new role. Some of it was some of the stuff that Suzanne's doing, but that we're consolidating together. That's emails, newsletters. It's putting the content together of those places. It's doing social media updates as well, helping to coordinate in terms of the presentations that we do on the presentation software. There's a number of other things, and that's Mackenzie Schwittai. And she's doing a fantastic job. She's coordinating Faith Life, helping us to coordinate Faith Life too. There's a number of different components to it. I know Wes was doing quite a bit and Mark was doing quite a bit. And so I really wanted to have that under one person and not have to pay Wes to do administrating that the platform, which again is important just to make sure everything's kept up to date and accurate as well. And that's about 40 hours a month that the Mackenzie actually spends on that as well. So very thankful just for her willingness to be able to do that and her desire to do that as well. And so we just want to make sure that that's recognized. There really isn't a lot of other significant changes. What we've tried to do is just, again, is pay people that are fair and that align with the effort, but also balance that out with a, just a principle of a laborer being worthy of their wages on that as well. And so for any of these things, that if you have questions, and again, I didn't go through every line item because I think probably just spare some of you just the tedium of going through that. These are documents available to the members of New City Church. There is nothing that we want to be hidden. We want to be working in full transparency, so those are available to you to take a look at. And if you want to follow up with any questions, then you can do so as well. And then the next one, do you have that next one? That's just a recapitulating of what I talked about before. So you can see the total giving last year was $286,000. Our total expenses were $285,000 with a budget surplus of $1,700. You'll see on the 2021, it's gone down for about the proposed expenses have gone down about $20,000. And that's primarily because of salary, not having a lead pastor and a worship director. So that's been the primary reason to see that. And it might even go down further if we don't get a lead pastor this year. And so again, as I've said in the past, the goal here is not about saving money. The goal is not about spending money. It's about investing wisely and furthering God's kingdom and strengthening us as a community. And so we want to do that wisely, but we also want to do it with the recognition that God is a generous God. And so we want to invest in not in expanding New City, but in reaching our city, which is really the goal. And the growth fund there is basically what we have in the bank. Now, some of that is what Wes has raised for his church plant, and some of that will actually also kick in when the church plant, when the time comes. But as you can see there, that healthy cash position. Now, what we've always basically said is having a lot of money in the bank as a church is not desirable. We are not for profit, so it's not about spending it just for spending's sake. So we want to make sure that we are investing the right things and they align with our priorities in terms of who we say we are as a church. The pastoral search team, I already touched on that, and the 7 people will start meeting in March, and we'll get that going.
And then just really the last thing I want to say here as we wrap up, no one person can do this. And, if you look at the names, and I've spoken the names, there's very few names that have either my name attached to it or Wes's name. He has maybe one or two, or Don's name. Tyler has one. This is the work of the whole church. Everybody has a part to play, and we've been saying that together. A healthy community is not about one person. In fact, right now there's about 40%. If you take away those who've just recently started coming to New City Church, 40% that are involved in serving some kind of capacity at New City Church. If we factor in Sunday morning, that goes out to about 50% of our church is involved in serving in some kind of capacity as well. Again, we want to see 100%. Everybody that God calls has a gift as well. Interestingly enough, many of you who've just started coming to New City Church are the ones who are basically most insistent in saying, put me in. Where can I serve? Where can I fit? And I just love that you've just started coming to New City Church and you get it. Not simply as consumers, but you want to invest in this community as well. And so I want to thank you for that. And let me just say that my role is quite simple. Not that it's easy, but it's actually quite simple. My role is ultimately to help you, to be a support to you, as it is with the rest of the elders here as well, with one thing in mind. For us to be reminded over and over again that we know where our help comes from. That comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And always to be focusing our eyes on Jesus Christ in everything that we do. It's been a tough year. It's been a hard year. Hopefully everything that I've told you, you can now answer the question, where is God? What is Christ doing? Hopefully you've seen that he is active, he is powerful, he is good, and he is gracious in his community. And hopefully you can say that with me, you're excited for the more to come that will actually take place this year. It's not that New City Church is great, but that we serve a great God who's been faithful to her and will continue to be faithful to her as well. Let me just finish with these questions and then we'll wrap up. How will we vote on a pastor or a building if we can't meet in person as per the bylaws? Shouldn't be an issue. Even actually, there's different polls. We can use SurveyMonkey. There's a number of different applications that will enable us to do polls or surveys. This is quite common this day and age where we can't do that, so that shouldn't be an issue. Will a copy of the budget be made available? How will that be made available? Probably just, we could post it at Faith Life. We're asking not to distribute it indiscriminately, but if you're a member of New City Church, and even if you're a regular, that's fine. Again, there's nothing in there that's actually hidden. Certainly, if you send an email request and just go onto our website, or we can even think about posting it as well. On the pastoral search team, somebody asked the question real quickly. The 8 people are Trudy Chan, Kim Grant, Michaela Ivancic, Gordon Hawks, Jing Zhang, Justin Wishart, Tom Decker, and myself, who I'll be recusing myself from voting because I'm a part of the session when it comes to that, but more just facilitating, encouraging, and networking. I'll be actually networking within our denomination actually for that. If the role of ruling elders is that important, why have you appointed Weston Tyler to but fill that role? They're not in that role. They're not the role of and it's quite common, by the way, is to actually have an assistant to the elders being actually godly men in the congregation. A ruling elder is called by the congregation. That's why they're not ruling elders at this point, but provide the needed an expanded counsel and support for us. And we're very, very thankful for what they bring to the table in serving you as well. That brings our presentation to an end. Thank you for tuning in. I know it's probably went a little bit longer. I know some of you basically said this is long overdue, and we, a number of you haven't really been feeling like you know everything that's going on, and I do apologize for that. As I said at the beginning, it's been a few months where we've actually had to triage and prioritize and make sure that things continued smoothly, and we were continued to grow in that capacity as well. So I just got to say, as a session, we were very, very thankful and encouraged, and hopefully you are as well. Let's keep the communication channels open. Certainly there's opportunity to connect as well. Let me just close off with a word of prayer. Father, thank you for your faithfulness. It is your faithfulness. We have a role to play, but the outcome, the fruit, the end is yours. And you have been pleased to work in through imperfect vessels. We are inadequate in ourselves, but we find our adequacy in you. We are weak in ourselves, but we find power in and through you. Thank you for your grace, which has been sufficient for us in every stage that we find ourselves as well. And thank you for this community. It is a work of Christ, and you are working to sustain and persevere and endure and give us everything that we need to not only finish our lives well, but to continue to grow as a witness and salt and light in this community. And so continue to give us what we need throughout this year, that we would be your representatives and faithful in that, both in loving you, loving each other, and loving our neighbors as ourselves. And so, Father, we just commit all these things into your hands as we continue this path and continue this journey, for we pray it all in your Son's name. Amen. Thank you, folks. Thanks for joining, and for those who will be joining a little bit later, and look forward to continuing this journey with you.